Welcome to today's historical deep dive, where we peel back the layers of myth and legend to uncover the raw, human truth behind the figures who shaped our world. Today, we step into the crucible of post-revolutionary France, a nation adrift, waiting for a force to pull it back from the brink. Forget the gilded portraits and the battle maps for a moment. Before the empire, before the crowns, there was just a young general, a broken country, and a perfect storm of ambition and opportunity. History isn't just names and dates. It's the chilling sequence of choices made under unimaginable pressure, the subtle shifts in power, and the relentless march of consequence. We'll explore the man who rose higher than any before him, only to fall just as spectacularly. Was he the Enlightenment's child or its ultimate betrayer? A strategic genius or a reckless gambler? A liberator or a tyrant? These aren't simple questions, and history rarely offers simple answers. It asks you to observe, to feel the weight of the past, and to draw your own conclusions. If you love immersive, real storytelling about ambition and downfall, hit like and subscribe. It helps us more than you know. We're on a mission to bring these complex stories to life. Drop a comment with your favorite Napoleon quote or the moment that shocked you most. Let's begin and change the way you think about history. You stand amidst the simmering chaos of Paris in 1799. The air hums not with revolutionary fervor, but with weariness and cynicism. This isn't the bright dawn of liberty promised by the guillotine. It's a frustrating, dangerous twilight. The streets, once vibrant with the promise of liberté, égalité, fraternité, now echo with the footsteps of disillusioned citizens navigating crippling inflation and constant political instability. You see the breadlines stretching down cobblestone streets, a stark testament to economic collapse. Ragged soldiers, unpaid and forgotten, haunt the taverns, their uniforms threadbare symbols of a state neglecting its defenders. Meanwhile, the wealthy few flaunt their assignat fortunes, paper money rapidly losing value, while the poor starve, a bitter, ironic twist on a revolution meant to abolish such inequality. The Directory, the five-man government that replaced the terror, is less a government and more a caricature of impotence, corrupt, fractured, and widely despised. Its members bicker amongst themselves, each maneuvering for personal gain while the nation teeters on the brink of collapse. Threatened by internal dissent, royalist plots here, Jacobin agitation there, and external enemies massing on the borders. The grand experiment of the Republic feels like a cruel joke played on the French people. The yearning you sense isn't for more revolution, for another bloody upheaval. It's for order, for stability, for a strong hand to quiet the noise and bring prosperity back to this exhausted land. This wasn't the glorious dawn they fought for. It was a slow, suffocating decay. Rumors swirl like the Seine mist, rumors of a general returning from Egypt. Not just any general, but a man who wins, who defies the odds, who commands respect, a man named Bonaparte. His reputation precedes him, like a conquering hero's trumpet blast, cutting through the political static of Paris. He abandoned his struggling army in Egypt, a calculated risk, a decision some would call desertion, others necessity. But it was timed with exquisite fortune, arriving just as the Directory's rotten structure was ready to crumble. This return wasn't merely a journey home. It was a strategic insertion into a power vacuum, a core decision to capitalize on France's desperation. What's often overlooked is just how ready France was to embrace a strongman. The revolutionaries had promised freedom and equality, but delivered terror, war, and poverty. The Directory promised stability, but delivered corruption and chaos. The average Parisian wasn't reading political tracts. They were worrying about feeding their families and avoiding impressment into the army. The political class, meanwhile, was so blind or self-interested, they were actively seeking a military figurehead to shore up their own power, believing they could control him. This reveals a surprising detail. The plot to overthrow the Directory, led by figures like Sieyès, didn't initially envision Napoleon as the sole ruler, but as a tool, a popular general to lend legitimacy and force to their new regime. They fatally underestimated his ambition and political acumen. The stage is set for a leader, any leader, who can promise an end to the endless turmoil. This moment reveals a timeless, chilling truth. Societies, exhausted by chaos and disillusioned by failed ideals, will often trade some liberty for the promise of security, creating fertile ground for those bold enough and ruthless enough to seize it. The palpable sense of anticipation and desperation in the air, a nation holding its breath, waiting for its fate to be decided by a man who understands power isn't just taken, but is often given by a desperate populace. Ask yourself, was this moment about Napoleon's genius, or simply about being the right man in the right place at the absolute worst time for everyone else? What would you have done standing amidst that weary crowd, looking for a sign of hope, any sign, in the swirling rumors of a returning general? October 1799. You are among the crowds lining the port as Napoleon Bonaparte lands in Fréjus. The air crackles, not just with the sea salt, but with an almost desperate anticipation. By all reasonable accounts, this moment should be shrouded in disgrace. He abandoned his army in Egypt, a move that in any other era, for any other commander, would spell court-martial, ruin, oblivion. Yet look around you. His arrival is met not with outrage, but with a thunderous, almost hysterical jubilation. People surge forward, not questioning his departure from his troops, but cheering the sight of their victorious general. News travels faster than reason. Courier services race across France like wildfire, carrying the singular, potent message, Bonaparte is back. See how quickly the atmosphere shifts? A nation weary of chaos, battered by revolutionary fervor, drowning in uncertainty under the ineffectual Directory, suddenly sees a beacon. Despair gives way to an electric, intoxicating possibility. The Directory, that collection of men clinging precariously to power, initially summoned him. They were wary, yes, but they hoped to leverage his popularity, his undeniable charisma, perhaps even use him as a tool against their own enemies. What they failed to grasp, what they terrifyingly underestimated, was the sheer force of nature they had just invited into their fragile house of cards. You witness their faces, a mix of relief and rapidly dawning terror. This moment is a masterclass in narrative overriding reality. Napoleon's carefully cultivated image as the invincible general, the one who brought glory back to France, overshadowed the inconvenient truth of the Egyptian campaign's conclusion. Defeat, retreat, and abandonment. His return wasn't merely a journey home. It was an arrival onto a political stage where, in the public's mind, he was already cast as the undisputed leading man. He didn't just step off a ship, he stepped into a power vacuum, carried on a wave of public adoration he didn't necessarily deserve based purely on recent events. This wasn't just leadership, it was perception engineered into destiny. Ask yourself, what does it take for a people to overlook the inconvenient facts for the comfort of a compelling story? What would you have done, standing in the directory's shoes, realizing you had just summoned your own replacement? The insight burns clear. Charisma, perceived success, and a captivating narrative are potent political currencies capable of drowning out truth and seizing power from those who still believe facts matter more than faith. The air hangs thick with secrecy in the salon, heavy with pipe smoke and unspoken ambition. Candlesticks cast long, dancing shadows, illuminating the faces of men who once dreamt of universal liberty and now plot its careful circumvention. You sit among them, listening to the low murmur of voices, stitching together a future cut from the cloth of cynicism. Emmanuel Joseph Sieyès is the architect of this particular maneuver. He, the abbé who famously declared the Third Estate everything, now sees the Republic as a ship adrift, needing a firm hand, his hand, to steer it back to harbor. He speaks of order, stability, the need to protect the revolution from its own excesses. But you watch his eyes. They hold the cold glint of a man who believes the masses are incapable of true self-governance, that only a select few possess the wisdom required. He has found his sword in Bonaparte, the young general whose fame now dwarfs the politicians he despises. Sieyès sees power he can direct, a military force to underpin a new constitutional framework he intends to design. Around the table gather others, disillusioned directory members weary of chaos, generals itching for stronger leadership, politicians who see the shifting sands and want to be on the side of the rising tide. The whispers coalesce into a plan, audacious in its simplicity and chilling in its manipulation. They will use the levers of the very government they intend to dismantle. A rumor, a fabricated threat, perhaps a resurgence of Jacobin terror, will be declared. This imminent danger will necessitate moving the legislative councils, the Council of Elders and the Council of 500, out of volatile Paris to the suburb of St. Cloud. There, away from the Parisian crowds who had overthrown monarchs and stormed Bastilles, the military can protect them. Under this thinly veiled military escort, the councils will be pressured, cajoled, or perhaps even forced to vote for a constitutional revision, placing effective power in the hands of a strong executive, a triumvirate of consuls, with Sieyès, of course, and crucially, Bonaparte among them. You feel the tension in the room, the collision of complex motives. There's Sieyès' genuine desire for a stable, well-ordered republic, born from the exhaustion of a decade of upheaval. But intertwined with it, inseparable now, is the raw, almost palpable ambition of Bonaparte, his barely concealed hunger for control, for a stage larger than any battlefield. This cabal, convening in the shadows and ostensibly working for France's salvation, is orchestrating nothing less than a sophisticated power grab, cloaked in legality and necessity. It's a stark lesson unfolding before you, how revolutionary ideals, forged in the white-hot furnace of popular will, can curdle into pragmatic cynicism. Those who initially championed liberty, declaring the absolute sovereignty of the people, now stand ready to become the architects of restriction, convinced they alone know best how to save the nation from itself. The revolution, they seem to believe, has served its purpose. Now comes the time for order, imposed from above. Ask yourself, was this cunning statecraft born of necessity, or the first clear sign that Bonaparte and those who enabled him saw France not as a republic to serve, but a kingdom to be conquered? You awaken to unusual activity on this cold November morning, the 18th Brumaire, year 8 of the Republic. It is 1799, and Paris is restless, yet this specific commotion feels orchestrated. Couriers are rushing, whispers fill the air. The Council of Ancients, the upper legislative house, is summoned with urgent haste. The pretext is a familiar specter in these revolutionary times. A dangerous Jacobin plot, supposedly threatening the very foundations of Paris and the legislature itself. Fear, that most ancient and effective tool of manipulation, is being deliberately stoked. Within hours, under the weight of this fabricated panic, manipulated members of the Ancients pass a decree. It is presented as a necessary measure for public safety. Both legislative councils will relocate tomorrow to St. Cloud, a few miles outside Paris, ostensibly for security. Crucially, General Bonaparte is appointed commander of all troops in the capital region, tasked with ensuring their safety during this crisis. You watch as Napoleon arrives to address the Ancients. He is not alone. A phalanx of loyal generals surrounds him, their presence a silent, imposing endorsement. His voice rings with authority, measured and calm as he accepts the mantle of protector, pledging to defend the Republic from internal enemies. It is a masterclass in political theater, a performance meticulously designed to appear legal and necessary. Every word, every gesture is cloaked in the language of public safety, national security, and Republican virtue. Yet the truth, clear to anyone with a discerning eye, is that this dangerous plot is largely a phantom, a convenient fiction amplified to justify extraordinary measures. This opening move is a textbook example of leveraging a perceived crisis. Create a threat or amplify a minor one until it feels monumental. Offer the indispensable solution yourself, draped in military legitimacy, and wrap the entire process in the guise of legal procedure. The insight here is profound. Power transitions are rarely purely violent conquests. They often begin with the subtle manipulation of existing structures, exploiting collective fear and the deep human desire for order to justify what would otherwise be a blatant power grab. It's a silent coup cloaked in legislative robes. Ask yourself, how often do we still see this tactic deployed today? A manufactured threat paving the way for increased authority. The fragility of the Directory wasn't its only weakness. It was the public's exhaustion with chaos, making them susceptible to believing any narrative that promised stability, even one based on a false alarm. November 10th, 1799. You are at the Palace of St. Cloud. The air here feels brittle, stretched thin over a hidden tension. Yesterday, the legislative councils, the Ancients, and the 500 were maneuvered here, supposedly for their safety from a phantom Jacobin plot. Today, this grand palace, usually a symbol of royal leisure, is a stage for a political drama threatening to devolve into farce or tragedy. Troops cordon off the grounds, their presence a constant, unsettling reminder of the true power broker waiting in the wings. Ostensibly guardians, they are the iron fist inside the velvet glove of this carefully orchestrated coup. Inside, the councils meet separately. In one wing, the Council of Ancients debates nervously. In the Orangery, the Council of 500 gathers, a room alive with Republican fervor and growing suspicion. The initial reports of a plot feel flimsy now. The air is thick with resistance. These elected representatives aren't puppets. They are wary men, Many deeply attached to the revolutionary principles Napoleon claims to protect. They begin to see the outline of the real conspiracy, a military takeover. Delays mount. The smooth procedural takeover envisioned by architect Sieyès is snagging, catching on the thorny reality of political will. The atmosphere shifts from one of controlled procedure to volatile confrontation. The conspirators, so confident yesterday, are losing control of the narrative. The elected body, suddenly aware its own existence is at stake, is pushing back, asking inconvenient questions, demanding oaths to the very constitution the coup seeks to overturn. The plan is fraying. Napoleon grows impatient. He is a general, a man of action, not political maneuvering. Waiting is torture. He decides to force the issue. He walks into the Council of Ancients, a dramatic entrance meant to awe and inspire. But his speech is awkward, fumbling. He talks vaguely of threats, of his devotion, demanding their trust. He lacks the silver tongue of a politician. The reaction is muted, confused, even hostile from some. This isn't the triumphant acclamation he expected. It underscores a crucial insight. Charisma on the battlefield doesn't automatically translate to command in the political arena. You can charge batteries, but you can't simply order men's votes. Then comes the critical moment, the plunge into the boiling cauldron of the 500. He enters the orangery, perhaps accompanied by grenadiers. It's a calculated risk, an attempt to intimidate. But the 500 are not the ancients. They erupt. Shouts rain down. Outlaw him. Down with the dictator. Deputies surge forward, surrounding him, grabbing at his clothes, shoving him. He is physically assailed, manhandled by enraged politicians in their robes. This isn't the cold, calculated move of a master strategist. It's a desperate gamble born of impatience, ending in personal humiliation and panic. Soldiers, perhaps his own guards, have to rush in and literally drag him out, potentially scratched and shaken. Outside, recovering, perhaps on the brink of collapse, the situation is dire. The Council of 500 is on the verge of declaring him an outlaw, a move that would legitimize his immediate execution. His political allies, like Sieyès, are frozen, their subtle plans shattered. The coup is failing politically. It is at this point that Napoleon's brother, Lucien, president of the 500, steps into the breach. Lucien, having desperately tried and failed to control the chamber, rushes outside and appeals directly to the troops. He dramatically claims deputies attempted to assassinate their general, calling on the soldiers to clear the hall of these rebels. This is the pivot. The fragile facade of legitimacy, the pretense of a legal transition, is ripped away. Napoleon, recovering his composure, or perhaps prompted by Lucien's desperate appeal, gives the fatal order. Soldiers, led by Joachim Murat, march into the orangery with bayonets fixed. The deputies, confronted by cold steel, scatter in terrified disarray, some reportedly leaping from windows to escape the military sweep. The Council of 500 is violently dispersed. The legislative body of the Republic is expelled by force. Later that night, a few compliant members from both councils are rounded up to rubber stamp the dissolution of the Directory and appoint the new provisional consuls, Sieyès, Ducos, and Bonaparte. The coup is salvaged, but not by political skill. It was won by the bayonet. This moment underscores the unpredictable nature of coups, even those meticulously planned. Legitimacy is a fragile thing. While you can manufacture consent for a time, genuine opposition, rooted in principle or suspicion, can quickly expose the artifice and threaten to derail the most carefully laid plans, turning calculated moves into desperate gambits requiring brute force. Ask yourself, was his panic in the orangery a fatal flaw, or did his eventual ruthless decision to use military force reveal a chilling, effective adaptability? What would you have done, standing there, feeling the plan crumble and the bayonets being fixed? The gilded doors of the Council of 500 are flung open, not with the measured pace of parliamentary entry, but with an abrupt force that signals intrusion. You are a witness, pressed into the throng of deputies, feeling the collective pulse of simmering tension. The air crackles. He enters not alone, but flanked by grenadiers, bayonets fixed. A visual declaration of intent that instantly poisons the already fragile atmosphere. This isn't the welcomed arrival of a statesman. It is the calculated step of a general walking onto alien terrain, mistaking it for a conquered field. The silence lasts only a heartbeat before the storm breaks. A roar erupts, a furious, guttural wave, unlike the disciplined shouts of a battlefield. "Down with the dictator!" they scream, their voices laced with outrage and fear. "Outlaw him! Down with the tyrant!" Deputies surge forward, a sea of black robes and furious faces, not in orderly protest, but in a chaotic, physical charge. You see hands reaching, grabbing at Napoleon's clothes, pulling, tearing. The military uniform, meant to convey authority, makes him a target. The chamber is no longer a forum for debate, but a mosh pit of pure, unadulterated political rage. The grenadiers, trained for squares and lines, are momentarily overwhelmed by the sheer, unpredictable fury of a mob fueled by ideology. They scramble, grabbing at their commander, pulling him back, literally wrestling him free from the grasp of irate legislators. He is stumbling, jostled, visibly shaken. The legend of Arcola, the man who faced cannons without flinching, is pale, flustered, his face betraying a shock that military resolve simply cannot mask. This is not the effortless command he knew on the sands of Egypt or the plains of Italy. This is a different kind of chaos, a raw, democratic venom he clearly underestimated. The insight burns clear. Military power, however absolute on the battlefield, is a blunt instrument in the delicate architecture of political legitimacy. Bayonets cannot command consent, nor can grenadiers shield you from the furious roar of elected representatives defending their perceived liberty. Napoleon, the master strategist of armies, revealed a profound naivety here, believing his victories and popularity could simply override parliamentary process and ideological resistance. It was a stark, humiliating lesson. Ambition unchecked by political finesse or respect for procedure can lead to personal failure, not just strategic defeat. The roar of legislative protest is its own potent battlefield noise, and on this day, it temporarily routed the general. Ask yourself, was this Napoleon's greatest political miscalculation? Believing he could take the legislature by storm, like he took a bridge? Did he fundamentally misunderstand the republic he sought to control? He is dragged out, stumbling, grenadiers around him less as guards and more as rescuers from the fury of the Council of 500. The air inside the orangery crackles with outrage. Napoleon, pale and incoherent from the failed confrontation, is outside, seemingly defeated, his gamble on a smooth transfer of power dissolving into shouts and chaos. But inside, his brother Lucien, president of the council, remains. He watches the plan unravel. Hears the cries to declare Napoleon an outlaw, the political death sentence that would end everything. Under immense pressure, Lucien makes his move. Demands ring out. Declare your brother outside the law. He refuses. The moment is balanced on a knife's edge. He is under guard, but he is still president. Seeing the cause collapsing, seeing his family's fate sealed by failure, Lucien doesn't hesitate. Guarded now by a detachment of grenadiers, not as prisoner, but as protector, he rushes from the hall, out into the crisp air where soldiers are milling, uncertain. Below him, the troops. Above him, the crumbling facade of legality and his brother's dream. Lucien draws his own sword. This isn't deliberation. This is theater, desperate and brilliant. His voice, amplified by the crisis, rings out. He points back to the hall, to the deputies. "Assassins!" he screams. "Traitors! They attempted to assassinate the general. They seek to plunge France back into chaos." He points his sword dramatically at Napoleon's chest, a breathtaking piece of performative loyalty mixed with genuine conviction. "I swear," he vows, "if my brother ever betrays the cause of liberty, I myself will run him through with this sword." The soldiers, trained to follow orders, but also citizens of a republic scarred by turmoil, are stunned. They haven't seen assassination attempts. They've seen Napoleon stumble. But Lucien's performance is powerful. He is their president, speaking directly to them, framing the situation in simple, visceral terms: betrayal, assassination, the republic in danger. He calls upon them, not to support a coup, but to save France from hidden enemies, from those within who would destroy it. He implores them, clear that hall, drive out these assassins, and save the republic. This act of sheer, audacious manipulation, this desperate gamble, works. The soldiers, presented with a narrative of victimhood and defense of the republic by their president, respond. They storm the hall. The deputies are scattered. The council dispersed. The fragile legal framework is shattered, replaced by military force, galvanized by a brother's lie. The insight here is stark. Crises are rarely decided purely by strategy. Often, they hinge on individual acts of courage, cunning, or improvisational genius like Lucien's. And the power of narrative, especially when delivered with conviction and authority in a moment of confusion, is immense. Lucien didn't win the day with facts. He won it by portraying Napoleon as a victim and the takeover as a rescue mission. He understood that people, particularly those trained to follow, respond powerfully to a clear story, a sense of righteous cause against perceived evil. What would you have done, seeing your family's ambition, your own future, on the brink of collapse? Would you have found the nerve, the words, the sheer performative power to reshape reality in that moment? The tense anticipation outside the hall of the Council of 500 snaps. Lucien, your brother, his voice raw with defiance and loyalty, has played his part, painting a picture of danger, justifying the extreme. The generals, your loyal officers, act on your unspoken command, translating political maneuvering into military action. Suddenly, the atmosphere inside the ornate chamber shifts from frantic debate to chilling dread. The rhythmic, heavy tread of boots echoes down the corridors, a sound utterly alien to the halls of legislation. Then they appear in the doorway, a tide of dark blue uniforms, their brass buttons gleaming dully in the light. These are your grenadiers, the hardened core of your army, faces set, bayonets fixed. They march in, not to escort or protect, but to occupy, to cleanse. You are not in the hall, but you feel the tremor, the wave of terror emanating from that room. Within the chamber, the deputies, robed in their formal attire, the custodians of the Republic's ideals, look up in startled horror. The air crackles with disbelief before erupting into chaos. This is not a coup planned in shadows. It is a brutal, public assertion of will, backed by steel. The grenadiers advance steadily, a wall of disciplined force. There is no negotiation, no debate, only the silent, inexorable push of armed men. Deputies scatter like startled birds. They trip over robes, scramble over benches. Some scream, some plead, but most simply flee. You see the desperate ones, cornered or simply overwhelmed by panic, throwing themselves out of the windows into the gardens below, choosing the uncertainty of a fall over the certainty of the bayonet. The image is stark, unforgettable. The men who voted laws now tumbling undignifiedly from the very building where those laws were made. The hall is not adjourned, it is cleared. Forcibly, efficiently, brutally. The legislative body that dared to oppose you, that clung to procedural power, is dissolved not by decree or election, but by the physical presence of soldiers. The tramp of their boots on the polished floorboards isn't just a sound. It's the definitive period mark at the end of the French Republic. The irony is bitter. A revolution born of citizens taking arms against oppressive authority now sees its own representative body dispersed by the very tool it once wielded. This moment is a visceral reminder of the ultimate arbiter of power, when political processes fray or are deliberately broken. You sought legitimacy, you tried persuasion, but when faced with resistance, the bayonet became the final argument. This isn't subtle statecraft. It is raw power overriding civilian authority with chilling efficiency. The insight solidifies. While consent is desired, true control, absolute control, often requires the willingness to apply force. The ability and willingness to use that force, even against the symbolic heart of representative government, is the definitive test for an aspiring authoritarian. This is your Rubicon crossed, the point of no return etched in the chaotic emptying of a legislative hall. Ask yourself, was this the calculated move of a leader securing stability, or the chilling leap into pure authoritarianism? What would you have done, facing that level of opposition, with power within your grasp? The dust from the coup of 18 Brumaire hasn't fully settled, but the stage is already being reset. You see three figures step into the temporary spotlight: Napoleon Bonaparte, the general; Emmanuel Sieyès, the revolutionary theorist; and Roger Ducos, a useful functionary. They are the provisional consuls, tasked with forging a new government from the ashes of the Directory. Sieyès, the veteran constitutional architect, believes he holds the blueprint, seeing Napoleon merely as the necessary sword arm. This is where the game begins in earnest, a political chess match where Napoleon reveals himself not just as a master of the battlefield, but of the council chamber. Sieyès proposes a complex system designed to dilute power, a labyrinth of checks and balances born from his fear of executive overreach. But Napoleon, with startling speed and ruthless pragmatism, maneuvers past the ideologue. he doesn't dismantle Sieyès' framework entirely. He simply rewrites the crucial parts, centralizing authority not in a council, but in a single office, the first consul. And there he places himself. You watch as Napoleon, leveraging his immense popularity from military victories like Marengo, coupled with shrewd political calculation and the quiet intimidation of any who dare openly dissent, solidifies his grip. The new Constitution of the Year 8 is a masterpiece of centralized power disguised as republican structure, ratified by a populace desperate for stability after a decade of revolution and turmoil. By 1802, Napoleon's position feels unassailable, boosted further by the Peace of Amiens, which brings a temporary halt to the wars engulfing Europe. France breathes a sigh of relief. Capitalizing on this moment of national calm and gratitude, Napoleon orchestrates his next move. He doesn't seize absolute power. He asks for it, but in a way that guarantees the answer. A national plebiscite is announced, a direct vote to the French people. The question is carefully, almost deceptively phrased. Shall Napoleon Bonaparte be consul for life? The result is an overwhelming yes, delivered with a margin that would make any modern autocrat envious. You see the mechanisms at play. A press tightly controlled, questions framed to link Napoleon directly to the desired stability, and the sheer, exhausted relief of a population weary of constant upheaval. It is a chilling demonstration of how fear and the longing for order can pave the road to autocracy. The truly insidious part? This wasn't a violent takeover. It was a form of popular endorsement, manipulated and manufactured, but ratified by the very people whose revolutionary ideals were being quietly eroded. Ask yourself, was this the pragmatic decision of a leader bringing order to chaos, or the calculated power grab of an ambitious man leveraging national exhaustion? What would you have done, standing in his boots, seeing the path to absolute power opened by the consent of the weary? This moment highlights a critical, uncomfortable truth. Authoritarianism rarely arrives fully formed in the night. Often, it takes incremental steps, each justified as necessary. Each ratified by a population willing to trade liberty for perceived security, step by calculated step. The popularity gained through genuine success, or its effective perception, proves a potent tool for dismantling democratic structures from within, with the populace's unwitting or willing consent. The air around you is thin, charged with a constant low hum of danger. As consul for life, you stand atop a precipice, the view breathtaking, but the ground underfoot is far from stable. Royalist agents, ghosts of the old regime, whisper in the shadows, plotting your demise. Assassination attempts aren't theoretical possibilities. They are chilling reminders that despite your power, enemies remain, tireless in their opposition. Every intercepted letter, every suspected conspirator, tightens the knot of paranoia in your gut. You are the irreplaceable cornerstone of this new France, yet that very indispensability makes you the prime target. The threats escalate, culminating in the audacious Cadoudal conspiracy in 1804. Royalist General Georges Cadoudal, a man of granite resolve, orchestrates a complex plot involving Bourbon agents, aiming to kidnap or assassinate you and restore the monarchy. The net closes in, uncovering a web of connections that stretches far beyond Paris. In the interrogation rooms, under intense pressure, names surface, hinting at complicity or at least association. With the exiled Bourbon princes, the pressure cooker intensifies. The question isn't just if they will strike again, but who among the old guard is still pulling the strings. This fear, this vulnerability at the zenith of power, breeds a chilling ruthlessness. The plot demands a response that isn't just reactive, but utterly decisive. You need to send a message that striking at the head of this new French state carries an unbearable cost. A cost that reaches even into the ranks of the old aristocracy. Suspicion falls upon the young Duc d'Enghien, a distant member of the Bourbon royal family, residing just across the border in Baden. Is he truly involved in the plot? Evidence is circumstantial, flimsy even, but the climate of fear is paramount. The need to decapitate any potential resurgence of the Bourbons feels existentially urgent. In a move that shocks Europe and stains your legacy, you order his seizure from neutral territory, a blatant violation of sovereignty. A swift, clandestine trial follows, little more than a formality conducted in the dead of night at the Château de Vincennes. Despite conflicting testimonies and a lack of concrete proof of his involvement in this specific plot, the verdict is predetermined by the political imperative. He is condemned. At dawn, the Duc d'Enghien is executed by firing squad in the castle moat. The act is one of immense political brutality and questionable legality, an act that, tragically, serves its immediate purpose. It sends a clear, terrifying message to royalist plotters and skeptical aristocrats. Opposition will be met with lethal force, and the old lineage offers no protection. Internal dissenters fall silent, cowed by the swift, merciless retribution. But the cost is steep. Royal courts across Europe are outraged, viewing it as regicide in disguise, solidifying their distrust and animosity towards your regime. Or you and your inner circle. This period isn't just about surviving threats. It's about realizing the fundamental instability of personal rule. You are the state, and if you fall, everything collapses. This constant vulnerability, this endless vigilance against unseen enemies, fuels a desperate search for a more permanent form of legitimacy. A republic, even one led by a consul for life, feels inherently fragile. It depends too much on one man's survival. What happens if an assassin's bullet finds its mark? The country could plunge back into chaos, perhaps even restore the hated Bourbons. This is the tragic irony. The harder you grasp for absolute security, the more isolated and paranoid you become. The enemies you eliminate are replaced by the fear you've instilled. The pressure of continuous threats doesn't lead to calm. It leads to the conclusion that only a hereditary system, a dynasty, can provide the necessary continuity and unquestioned legitimacy to safeguard your achievements and the future of France. The execution of Enghien, while stopping one plot, simultaneously removes a potential figurehead for restoration and underscores the desperate need for a different kind of security. One rooted in bloodline, not just military or political power. It is in this crucible of fear and ambition that the seed for the First French Empire is irrevocably planted. Ask yourself, was the execution of Enghien a calculated act of statecraft necessary for survival? Or a paranoid overreach born of insecurity? What would you sacrifice for the perceived stability of the nation you had built? The idea, once a tremor beneath the carefully constructed facade of the consulate, now rises to the surface, spoken not in hushed whispers, but in drawing rooms and legislative chambers, carefully curated for compliance. You are consul for life, the ultimate power broker, the savior of France, the architect of peace and prosperity. But Europe's old guard still watches, suspicious, hostile. Monarchs who trace their lineage back centuries refuse to truly accept the upstart Corsican who rose from the ashes of their revolution. Stability, your inner circle argues, demands more than just a leader. It demands an institution, a dynasty. The Bourbons still lurk in exile, dreaming of restoration. The scent of conspiracy hangs in the air. And then the word is uttered, not as a question, but as a solution. Emperor. The title resonates deep within the French psyche, echoing the grandeur of Rome, the power of Charlemagne. It is, on the surface, a direct repudiation of the Republic whose principles you swore to defend. Yet the argument is framed with masterful irony. Becoming emperor is the ultimate guarantee of the revolution's gains against the return of the Bourbons. It's presented not as a personal power grab, but a necessary bulwark. The logic flows like an unstoppable tide. The title will deter assassins, because killing an emperor throws a whole system into chaos, not just removing a single man. It will solidify alliances with wary European courts who understand the language of hereditary power. It ensures a clear succession, preventing the turmoil that follows your potential death. It finally elevates France to its rightful place, led by a figure who can stand as an equal, no, a superior to other monarchs. You listen to the arguments, perhaps feigning reluctance for a moment, allowing the pressure to build. You see the ambition reflected not just in the eyes of your advisors, but in your own heart. Ambition, you learn, is a restless force. Achieving one goal rarely satisfies. Instead, it reveals the next, higher peak to conquer. The consulate for life was a summit, but the imperial throne looms like a mountain demanding to be scaled. The pursuit of power escalates, justified by perceived necessity, the ever-present threats, internal and external, and by the intoxicating prospect of ultimate, unquestioned authority. The man who saved the Republic is now poised to become its sovereign, trading the simple title of citizen for the weight of a crown. Ask yourself, when does saving a nation transition into ruling it? Is the emperor merely the ultimate protector, or does the crown become the prize itself? This transformation from savior to sovereign is a story as old as power itself, a chilling reminder of how easily extraordinary authority can reshape the very ideals it was meant to protect. The air in Paris thickens with anticipation, not of revolution or spontaneous uprising, but of something colder, more calculated. You stand in the wings, watching the final act of a meticulously staged drama unfold. The Senate, once the echo of Rome's grandeur, is now little more than a sounding board for one man's ambition. Filled with Napoleon's loyalists, men whose careers were gifts from his hand, they perform their pre-written script flawlessly. They don't deliberate. They propose. The proposal is audacious, yet presented with the inevitability of fate. The establishment of the French Empire, with Napoleon Bonaparte as its hereditary emperor. This isn't a cry from the heart of the nation, but a decree echoing from gilded chambers, a signal that the Republic is not just ending, but being paved over. To rubber stamp this seismic shift, a second national plebiscite is announced. The question posed to the French people is framed carefully, seemingly democratic. Do you accept the new constitution that elevates the first consul to emperor, On the surface, it's another appeal to popular will, reminiscent of past votes that cemented his power. But look closer. The machinery of the state hums not with debate, but with control. Opposition voices are not reasoned with, they are silenced. Public spaces are saturated with propaganda, painting the empire as the logical, necessary evolution, the only path to continued stability and glory. The process of voting itself is managed, nudged towards the desired outcome through subtle and not so subtle pressures. The result, when finally announced, is overwhelmingly positive, a tidal wave of yes votes. Yet, this isn't the spontaneous surge of popular affection that might elevate a hero. It's the carefully constructed facade of consent. You witness the construction of a mandate on a national scale, not through genuine democratic discourse, but through relentless pressure, controlled information, and the chilling absence of any viable alternative. The will of the people is not discovered here. It is manufactured and presented as an undeniable fact. This engineered approval is not a foundation built on trust, but a veneer applied over absolute power. This moment reveals a crucial insight into authoritarian rule. Even in the starkest absence of true freedom, the appearance of popular legitimacy is paramount. Napoleon, the pragmatist and master strategist, understood this deeply. A mandate, however artificial, lends a crucial veneer of legitimacy to his reign, both domestically and on the international stage. It silences potential dissent by claiming the voice of the nation, and it presents a united front to jealous foreign powers. Leaders seeking absolute power will always go to extraordinary lengths to stage-manage public approval, knowing that the echo of popular will, even if faked, is a powerful tool for consolidation and control. Ask yourself, was this a necessary evil for stability, or the ultimate betrayal of the revolutionary ideals he once claimed to champion? He demands his presence, not as a supplicant seeking divine blessing, but as a host summoning a crucial, though unwilling, guest. To add the veneer of ancient legitimacy to his revolutionary power, Napoleon insists that Pope Pius VII travel from Rome to Paris for the coronation. This isn't a polite invitation, it's a calculated move, a geopolitical chess game played with centuries of tradition as the board. For Napoleon, the Pope isn't a spiritual authority whose touch consecrates an emperor. He is the ultimate symbol of the old world, and his presence will force that world to acknowledge the dazzling rise of the new. You imagine the scene, the Vatican councils debating, the ancient institution wrestling with the audacity of this Corsican general, who now holds the reins of France. To refuse is to risk Napoleon's wrath, perhaps even another invasion of Italy. To accept is to lend the Church's immense historical weight, its deep roots in European consciousness, to a regime built on overthrowing kings and emperors sanctioned by God himself. The Pope makes the difficult journey, a pilgrimage not of faith, but of political necessity. It is arduous, symbolically fraught, every league traveled towards Paris, a concession, a forced blessing of the upstart. But here is the crucial, almost theatrical twist that defines Napoleon's relationship with power and symbol. He summons the Pope, not to be crowned by him, but to be witnessed by him. On the day itself, in the Grand Notre Dame Cathedral, Napoleon takes the imperial crown and places it upon his own head. Then he crowns his empress, Josephine. The Pope sits nearby, a potent symbol of old-world authority, rendered a mere observer in this defining moment of the new empire. This isn't just pageantry, it's a declaration. Napoleon is saying unequivocally that his power does not flow from divine right bestowed by the Church, but from his own strength, his own ambition, and the will of the French nation, as he interprets it. The Church lends its historical gravity, its visual link to Charlemagne and beyond, but Napoleon maintains ultimate control. He uses tradition like a cloak, wrapping himself in its legitimacy, while ensuring everyone knows he put the cloak on. The deeper insight here is stark and timeless. Those who seize power, often through revolutionary means that reject old systems, are the very ones most eager to co-opt the symbols and institutions they once scorned. They don't do it out of genuine reverence. They do it to enhance their own authority, to appear less like radical outsiders and more like inheritors of a grand lineage. The Pope's difficult journey and passive presence at the coronation are a testament to this. The bending of ancient authority to legitimize audacious, self-made power. Ask yourself, when have you seen modern leaders or movements borrow the symbols of the past they supposedly rejected? What does that tell you about the nature of legitimacy and how those who seek power understand its psychology? It's a performance of history, staged not for reverence, but for control. You stand in the vast, freezing nave of Notre Dame Cathedral. It is December 2nd, 1804, a day history will etch in gilded letters. The air is thick and heavy, carrying the scent of ancient stone, frankincense, and damp velvet. The sound is a low, resonant murmur, the shuffling feet of thousands of dignitaries, the hushed whispers of the curious crowds packed into every available space, punctuated by the majestic swell of a choir. You are surrounded by the elite of France and Europe, a glittering tapestry of privilege and power, all waiting, all watching. And then, the procession. It is less an entrance and more a tidal wave of calculated grandeur. Napoleon and Josephine arrive, followed by the entire imperial court. A river of silk, jewels, and military regalia. Every single detail has been meticulously choreographed, a breathtaking performance designed not just for those present, but for the ages. They arrive in carriages laden with symbols, preceded by heralds, accompanied by martial music and religious chants. It is a deliberate echo of the coronations of French kings that took place centuries ago in Reims, a conscious effort to wrap the raw new power of the empire in the comforting, legitimate mantle of ancient monarchies. Yet, subtly woven into the display are symbols of the revolution, the tricolor, the civic oaths, a carefully balanced tightrope walk between old legitimacy and new authority. The sheer scale of the event is overwhelming. It isn't just wealth on display. It's control. Every person is in their assigned place. Every movement is planned. Every symbol carries weight. This spectacle is designed to awe, to silence the whispers of dissent, to prove, beyond any shadow of a doubt, that this new empire is not the fleeting accident born of chaos, but a permanent, inevitable fixture in the grand narrative of Europe. You feel the weight of centuries pressing down within these ancient walls, yet juxtaposed sharply with the recent, visceral memory of revolution, terror, and the abrupt overthrow of the old order. This ceremony isn't merely a religious rite or a political formality. It is a declaration. It is power performed on the grandest stage imaginable. Authority, Napoleon understood deeply, isn't just something you exercise with armies and decrees. It is something you perform for the world. Elaborate rituals, potent symbols of power, and lavish displays of wealth and control are essential tools in the arsenal of any ruler seeking to solidify a new regime. They are the stagecraft that projects an image of unshakable strength, historical inevitability, and divine right, cleverly masking the often brutal, chaotic reality of the path taken to reach this apex. Ask yourself, is such performance a necessary element of leadership, or is it the ultimate act of political theater designed to hypnotize the populace into accepting the status quo? Napoleon, famously, took the crown from the hands of Pope Pius VII and placed it upon his own head and then upon Josephine's. This wasn't disrespect, it was another calculated move in the grand performance. It was a visual statement to the world. His power came not from the church, nor solely from the people, but from himself, forged by his own will and ambition. It was a dazzling, audacious assertion of supreme self-made authority, a symbol more potent than 1,000 speeches. What would it feel like to place the weight of an empire upon your own head under the gaze of history? The vast nave of Notre Dame swells with anticipation. December 2nd, 1804. You are a witness, lost in the gilded spectacle. The weight of centuries and the raw energy of a nascent empire colliding in this sacred space. Pope Pius VII sits, a figurehead lending ancient legitimacy, his hand raising the heavy regalia in blessing. The air is thick with incense and expectation, a carefully constructed scene designed to awe the world. This isn't merely a coronation. It's a performance of power, the final audacious act in a rise few could have ever predicted. The moment arrives. The Pope approaches the throne. All eyes are on the emperor-to-be. Tradition dictates the pontiff places the crown. God, through his earthly representative, bestows the divine right. But Napoleon, the man who found the crown of France lying on the ground and picked it up with his sword, has rewritten the rules of possibility. In a move that sends a ripple, imperceptible yet profound, through the assembled dignitaries, he doesn't wait. He reaches out, takes the laurel wreath crown, heavy with gold leaves, ancient symbolism wrapped in modern ambition, from the altar himself. He turns, facing the multitude, not the Pope. His hand, steady and strong, raises the crown, and then he places it firmly on his own head. Silence seems to stretch, echoing louder than any cheer. He has bypassed not just the Pope, but centuries of tradition, the very concept of monarchical legitimacy flowing from divine grace. His authority, this single gesture declares, comes from himself, from his relentless will, his unparalleled achievements on the battlefield, his cunning in politics, and crucially, from the revolutionary will of the French people who supposedly elevated him. It is a physical manifestation of the ultimate self-made man, not inheriting power, not receiving it as a gift from God or man, but seizing it as a right earned through sheer, unadulterated capability. Then a softer, perhaps more complex act follows. He turns to Josephine, his empress. Kneeling before him, she awaits her own crowning. With a tenderness that belies the iron will just displayed, he places a smaller, diamond-encrusted crown upon her head. He crowns her, yes, but only after crowning himself. His power is primary. Hers flows from his. Even in this shared moment, the hierarchy is clear, dictated entirely by his hand. This act is not mere pomp. It is a profound statement etched in gold and stone. It is the peak of ego made manifest, the ultimate expression of an individual's belief in their own destiny and indispensable nature. He didn't just become emperor, he declared himself emperor, accountable first and foremost to his own ambition and the power he had personally amassed. It was a defiant rejection of traditional sources of legitimacy, divine right, aristocratic lineage, in favor of a new power, forged in the crucible of revolution and tempered by personal genius and military might. The insight here is stark. True power, in the eyes of the intensely ambitious, is never granted, it is taken. This moment, perhaps more than any battle, encapsulates the very essence of Napoleon's self-conception. Consider the weight of this decision. Was this the height of strategic genius, solidifying his rule by linking it to revolutionary merit rather than archaic claims? Or was it the first, blinding flash of hubris, alienating the old powers of Europe and setting an impossibly high standard for himself? What would you feel, standing in his boots, having come from obscurity on a remote island to literally crown yourself master of an empire in the heart of Catholic Europe? It is a moment that defies simple judgment, a knot of ambition, symbolism, and self-belief unparalleled in history. This was not just taking a crown. It was redefining the source of power itself. The echoes of the coronation fanfare die out, but the sound of chains replacing silk is unmistakable. The Republic, birthed in blood and idealism, is dead. In its place stands the Empire, a colossal edifice built on the foundations you forged, the steel discipline of your armies, the intricate web of your administration, and the carefully orchestrated roar of popular consent. France is unified, disciplined, outwardly magnificent. Order, yes, it is restored, a towering, efficient order that dwarfs the chaotic years that came before. Under your absolute command, bureaucracy flows, justice is streamlined, and the levers of state power are pulled with unprecedented precision. But look closely at the figure on the throne. The grand design has subtly, profoundly shifted. No longer does the leader serve the state. The state now serves the ruler. Its vast resources, its very destiny, are now instruments of your singular ambition, your lineage's future. This is perhaps the most profound transformation of all. The revolution ends not in collective liberty, but in personal paramountcy. Tragic irony hangs heavy in the air. The man who rose on the tide of overthrowing kings now wears the grandest crown of all. The crown, however, is not a final prize, but a constant, demanding master. It is a self-made throne, perched precariously high, and it requires perpetual affirmation. Every year must bring new victories, fresh triumphs, larger swaths of territory to justify this unprecedented title, this rupture with 1,000 years of legitimate succession. You become a king of battles, forever needing to prove your right to rule through conquest. This desperate need for external validation breeds an internal insecurity few dare to see. How secure is a throne held by sheer force of will and arms? Not secure at all. This leads to perpetual conflict. Those who dreamed of a true republic now see only a tyrant. Their quiet resentment, a constant undercurrent you must ever watch. The old monarchs of Europe, their initial fear turns to implacable hatred. You are not one of them. and your very existence on a throne they deem illegitimate is a challenge they cannot ignore. The storm gathers on every horizon, fed by the wind of your ambition and the fear of every established power. Ask yourself, was taking the crown the ultimate triumph, or the beginning of an unwinnable war against the very nature of stability itself? The weight is crushing, requiring endless, unsustainable effort to keep the balance, proving that gaining ultimate power is not an endpoint, but a new beginning fraught with greater, often fatal, challenges. You step back from the spectacle of 1804. The gilded carriages have passed, the incense has faded, and the echo of acclamations still rings in the ears. But trace the path that led here, from the political instability that birthed Brumaire in 1799 to the moment the first consul became Emperor of the French. This isn't just a sequence of historical dates. It's a timeless human drama playing out on a grand scale. The corrosive nature of unchecked ambition, the seductive silent call of absolute power, and the complex, often heartbreaking relationship between a leader who believes they know best and the people they are meant to serve. You witness Napoleon's transition, a deliberate, chilling metamorphosis from servant of the state, the man who swore to uphold the republic, to its unquestioned master. The decision to seize the imperial throne, culminating in that audacious, unprecedented moment of self-coronation within Notre Dame, wasn't merely a political maneuver or the restoration of monarchy by another name. It was a profound, almost terrifying statement about where ultimate authority now resided. Not in the law he codified, not in the institutions he built, and certainly not in the fickle will of the people he ostensibly represented. No, authority was now centered squarely, undeniably, and only in the indispensable individual, himself. He brought order from chaos. Yes, undeniably brilliant in his execution and organization, sweeping away the lingering uncertainty like dust. But the price was steep. The very liberties the revolution had bled for were quietly, systematically dismantled in the name of stability. His fatal flaw wasn't a lack of genius, but the blinding belief that he alone was the ultimate guarantor of France's destiny, an idea that could only be sustained through perpetual expansion. Through victory piled upon victory, an unsustainable cycle that inevitably led not to eternal empire, but to exile. The coronet he placed upon his own head that December morning became less a symbol of legitimate bestowed power and more a crushing burden, a weight requiring endless war, endless conquest, merely to maintain its luster, its perceived necessity. Consider the path you have witnessed in this journey, from a society teetering on the brink of anarchy to a military intervention disguised as constitutional necessity. From manipulated legality and carefully stage-managed plebiscites to the increasingly open use of brute force and political purges. From genuine popular endorsement born of exhaustion and hope to the ultimate act of self-coronation, a final repudiation of any authority higher than his own will. These steps, this chilling sequence, echo through history like a blueprint for how republics, born in idealism, can crumble under pressure, and how strongmen, promising salvation, can rise from the ashes of disillusionment. It forces us to ask the difficult, uncomfortable question: what if history, in countless different guises and costumes, is always repeating this pattern, whenever societies become disillusioned, fractured, and begin to crave a savior figure, someone strong enough to simply fix things. The story of Napoleon's rise to emperor, his self-coronation, demands we examine our own deep-seated desires for order, for strength, for stability, and the price we, consciously or unconsciously, might be willing to pay for it. Standing on the cold, wind-swept shores of St. Helena, the edifice he built upon his own colossal will crumbling around him, perhaps even Napoleon himself might have conceded the truth of his own chilling words spoken in exile. "Power is my mistress. I have worked too hard at her conquest to allow anyone to rob me of her." A moment of tragic clarity. Or perhaps, as history so often shows, power, like any demanding mistress pursued above all else, can ultimately prove fickle and terribly demanding, leaving its suitor alone, not with an eternal legacy, but with the cold, hard wreckage of their ambition. This ascent wasn't just about conquering Europe, it was about conquering the very idea of shared authority, and in doing so, sowing the seeds of his own ultimate isolation. What then is the great, indelible lesson etched into history by the legacy of the self-made emperor who crowned himself? It is perhaps the stark, unflinching truth that while a single individual may bring temporary order and dazzling efficiency, the foundation built solely upon one person's will, however brilliant, is inherently unstable. The pursuit of power for power's sake, the belief in one's own indispensability to the point of dismantling the very liberties one swore to protect, inevitably demands unsustainable sacrifices, endless conflict abroad, quiet suppression at home. We gain wisdom when we study history honestly, not just admiring the brilliance of the strategist or the reformer, but dissecting the motives, the choices, the creeping corruption of unchecked power. Napoleon's journey from revolutionary general to lonely emperor serves as a perennial warning that the desire for order, when unchecked by a fierce protection of liberty, can pave the road for the very tyranny it seeks to avoid. His legacy is not just one of maps redrawn and laws reformed, but a profound reflection on the nature of ambition, the fragility of republics, and the enduring human temptation to trade freedom for the promise of strength embodied in a single, indispensable man. In the end, it wasn't the armies of Europe that truly defeated him. It was believing he could place himself above the laws of history and the very human spirit he sought to command.